My name is Just a Fan, and I just saw Incredibles 2. And it was actually a fun movie. I liked it quite a bit. I'm going to do a very much non-spoiler review for it first, and then we'll hop into a spoiler review where all bets are off. And before I begin, I just want to say something really, really strange that happened at the movie theater. Just because, we have our trailers, our previews, our commercials these days before a movie started. Remember in the past when they just had those still images and there was not even any speaking or sound? That's amazing. But anyway, one of the ones that came up right before The Incredibles started was this interesting promotion. Usually I would say promotional video, but in this case I think it started with Samuel L. Jackson, and it had some of the other actors, who voice characters in the Incredibles movies, and it was like they were like apologizing to us that it took so long and kind of praising the cast and the crew and the direction and the storyboard people and the artists and the voices, which is great. Like, we should totally, absolutely, especially for animated movies where there's so much more work that goes into it than most of us even see or think about. But good for, praising them, promoting them, but it was done to such an apology. It was like, it's been 14 years, we've been waiting so long. It's been 14 years, you've been waiting so long. They brought it up like almost every other line was them apologizing or saying something about how it's worth the wait, don't worry. But I was like, geez, good, yeah, like I said, good for promoting that, but do we really live in this age where, especially with the advent of the internet, where something like a sequel can't come out so much later without people just getting so upset and so annoyed? I listen to a radio station every morning, that's my alarm, where it has a segment called Morons in the News, which is really fun, but half the time it's just people just freaking out over the littlest things, and it's like, is humanity really at this point where we can't just be excited for a movie and not have to lash out and be angry that it took so long for the movie to come out? I get it, I've been waiting 14 years to see The Incredibles sequel too, but to the point where they feel the need to have to make a video where they apologize for that, so they hope that no one yells at them and stuff like that. It was a really weird experience. So, I don't know if anybody else, going to theaters is seeing the same thing or not, but at least from what I saw, it just made me feel glad that they care to say something like that, but just really uncomfortable about humanity and why they would need to do it. But that's just a side note. It was very, very weird to me. Anyway, here we go. So, a non-spoiler discussion of Incredibles 2. Where do I start? Because it was pretty fun. I laughed quite a few times. I did, and not scoff, but I did kind of think a few times too, because it had some great elements. It was still really well made, and you wouldn't expect anything less from Pixar and Disney, and after 14 years especially. I guess one of my first feelings about the movie was this. As it started, your opening act, your first 10, 20, 30 minutes type of thing, in that time zone, I was thinking, man, this is just well made, and I even found myself thinking these exact words. Even if there's some dumb parts to this, or it ends up being stupid or whatever, this is at least a very well-made movie once again. So we at least have that. That's one of the earlier things I was thinking. In terms of humor, when I was laughing, there were some things that was almost like, whoa, wow, I'm honestly shocked that they would even put that in a Pixar movie. Not that it was too, that makes it sound more scandalous than it really was, but a couple things, and I guess specifically it was dialogue, like words, choice of words that were being used and how they used them. I was almost like, wow, I haven't seen that in a Pixar movie recently, or maybe ever. So that was interesting, and it kind of made the movie more fun in certain aspects. The superhero stuff was great. Oh, and this, this is such an odd thing, but I loved in the original Incredibles movie, I loved how we had classic superhero stuff. They kind of got it when it came to superheroes and old school things. Other than making the joke of, hey, that's how you do it, that's old school, there's no school like the old school, other than just spelling it out like that, just because we had, heroes called Gazer Beam and, all these interesting, Dyna Guy. It was just kind of classic superheroes, classic things they did, and how the intro in the Incredibles 1 movie started. You really seem to appreciate, the original superhero society and how that kind of worked for our society too. We had our comics and our 60s Batman with Adam West and Burt Ward. So those kinds of things are definitely appreciated in the original movie, which I love. That's my thing. the 60s Batman TV show with Adam West and Burt Ward is probably one of my most favorite things ever. If I ever got a 3 wishes from a genie, one of my wishes would be to go back to that time zone and just work on that show, just like be a crew member somewhere and just enjoy all of that stuff, because it's just great. And so the whole point of that is, in the second one here, do we get enough of that, or do we get any of that? Because for people like me, that's such a vital piece to really make the film enjoyable. And a little bit, yes. And this isn't really a spoiler, but I gotta say, this is a very weird thing. At some point in the movie, there's a cartoon being played, and the cartoon, I'm not even kidding, is the original Johnny Quest cartoon. I was like, what is Johnny Quest doing in our Incredibles movie? It was very weird and very bizarre, but just the fact that they had, they have to, if they're going to put like a cartoon on the TV, what do you choose? The original Johnny Quest? I mean, that's awesome. So they definitely do have some appreciation there, some of that appreciation from the first one for these older things that people like me just love. I have no idea how many other people in the audience even knew what Johnny Quest was, so I'm actually really curious to see if anybody else has any reactions to that. Like, was the whole crowd like, whoa, it's Johnny Quest? Or was there like one person who's like, over 50 in the audience, like, that's funny. That's kind of what I was like, although I'm not over 50. So, I like that aspect to it. Superhero things, just, using their powers, getting out of situations, getting into situations, responding to situations. It was pretty fun. You got some good fast-paced action that kind of only animated movies like this can work for. Because I will say this, I'm really, really not into the whole like live-action Marvel superhero thing that's been going on for the past like 10 years. I saw, like, the original Iron Man movie in theaters, and it was, like, okay. And by the, like, when I started watching Iron Man 2, I actually just hated it so much. I think I fell asleep because I was so bored and so frustrated with it. And, like, it's just all these, like, these Captain America movies, these Thor movies, and, like, all these just superhero. I'm really not into those at all. And when I see The Incredibles, I feel like it fits me better. For whatever reason, I have more fun watching this animated, 3D animated Pixar Disney movie much more than watching the guy who plays Captain America do all his Captain America things in a movie where, I don't know, for some reason that doesn't work. And so it did work here. I do, just the fact that it's a superhero movie, I do really like, just like in the first one too. So superhero stuff, action kinds of stuff was pretty good, pretty fast paced in some places, which is fair because I guess it's the style of how they do things lately. In terms of pacing, I guess I used the word pacing right there. And that was for, action scenes. But pacing in this movie does have some issues. Not at all like the first one. The first one I thought was great in terms of pacing. There were no scenes in the first movie that felt like they were being dragged out too long and we were just waiting for this part to end, or like it was just being filler or anything like that. This movie, the second one, does have some scenes where I don't know if I would call them filler, but they really didn't add any character. It was just stuff happening just to happen. And then they cut back to, story, there's story A, story B, C, D. Story A is kind of your main plot. And rather than B, C, or D, those subplots, contributing to characters somehow or contributing to story A or, preparing to meet up with story A later, some things just kind of happened and it happened again and again. And I was like, okay, well, that's not useful. So in terms of pacing and things like that, we're going to have some issues for some people like me with this second movie here, but not enough to make the movie not worth it. And that's one of the most important things to say. There's definitely enough elements in this movie that are really well done and really fun and funny at some points where the movie's definitely watchable. Give it a shot. Do not shy away from this movie at all. Especially if you like the first one, watch this one too. We get some pretty good recurrence from the first movie in terms of actors, or, I guess characters, seeing characters from the first one, seeing them again, and the ways they did that. That was definitely enough, and we also got our share of newer characters, and that was also done pretty well. It's almost spoilery to say this, but in terms of superheroes, I'm just going to say that, keep that general. In terms of superheroes in this movie, I will say I kind of, other than our main characters, I kind of didn't like those as much as I liked the other superheroes we heard of or saw bits and pieces of in the first movie, which is interesting, because in the first movie, we had Frozone and The Incredibles, and that was pretty much it, right? We didn't really get to see or interact with any of the other characters I mentioned, like Dyna Guy and I almost said Elastigirl, but we definitely saw her. Dyna Guy and all the other characters that Edna mentions died because they had capes, and of course we saw a bunch of other superheroes in the Chronos computer system thing where it shows a lot of the superheroes who had been killed by the Omnidroid things. So those were kind of more classic to me and more fun, and they had names like Dyna Guy, that's just kind of fun, and they kind of looked classic and original, and they just kind of fit a thing. And in this new movie with the other superheroes, the non-main characters, I was kind of like, it was so like new age, we had these new younger people, for some of them, these new younger people who do their own thing, and it's like kind of bright and flashy, and it's like not very classic, which is fine. It was interesting to me to see that difference, and I didn't appreciate those as much. I kind of wish there was more of like the original classic superheroes, like if we got to find out more about Gazer Beam or Dyna Guy or something like that, but it really wasn't. It was all just this new stuff right there, new flashy young person thing where we do our thing, yeah. And sure, that's the style of society these days because we have the internet and people do their thing like that, so sure. And I can't be too specific yet, but there were some things where I said, please don't do this, please don't do this, please don't do this, and they did it. So some people might have a little bit of trouble with some aspects of the movie, although I do think pretty much the thing I found in the movie to be the weakest part and just was the least good, maybe not even bad or terrible, but just definitely the least good, I think most people are going to be fine with. So maybe I'll be a little bit more negative about some aspects of the movie than other people will be, but there were definitely some things where I was really hoping they wouldn't do it, and they really went into it full force, and I was like, dang it. But we'll see what happens there. Other non-spoiler things. I just saw the movie, so it's really hard to not do the spoiler thing in the non-spoiler area. Here's a thing where it's kind of like with superhero movies, I have seen the original X-Men movie. I don't even know how many of those there are these days, but the original Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry, what's his name, Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, that original X-Men movie. I did like that movie more than other superhero movies just because I was impressed with the amount of interaction that the mutants or the superheroes in the X-Men universe have with the rest of society. In a lot of other movies, or, any superhero story, Batman and Superman, Batman's some mysterious guy, we don't know who he is, we don't know who Superman is, we don't know he's Clark Kent. And so, yeah, society, they're just a hero to society, but there's not really much interaction there other than hero saves people from evil kind of thing. But in the X-Men movies, I was always impressed, well, at least the early ones, sorry, let me make this clear, with the early X-Men movies, the original good ones, except for the third, where it's there's politics involved in that one senator guy who's trying to fight against mutant rights and all that stuff. It's kind of like, man, that's impressive to have part of your story, have politics and society woven into your superhero drama and superhero characters. So it's kind of cool. And so here we are with The Incredibles now back in 2004. It was also impressive to have this concept of right off the bat, the superheroes get banned from being super, you're not allowed to be a superhero and save people. And I like that intro in the first one. It's really fun to have that kind of classic narrator guy and the classic black and white, shots and newspapers and clippings and things like that. It's super cool. So again, we have this interesting thing where we get to work with superheroes and society together. But then that didn't really have a lot of play in the first movie. By the end of the movie, it had that one older gentleman guy who works with Mr. Incredible saying, "You did good, Bob. Let the politicians figure that out." It was kind of there, and that's fair. And so for the second movie here, watching the trailer, we kind of had this idea. One of the main points they showed was the idea that we want to bring the supers back. Elastigirl, you got to be the one to bring them back in the right light, type of thing. So going into this second movie, we at least had the lead-in of that's going to happen, or there's going to be some more interaction with society, politics, or whatever, and so that's fair. And I will say that aspect of the movie, it was kind of weak, structurally. It did have structure. It wasn't like it was totally pointless. But just going from point A across the bridge of plot lines to point B, where that kind of came full force together, I was kind of like, oh, they were going for a thing, and I guess it sort of worked, but it was a little weak. So I was actually thrown. That's one of the things I also felt early on, or halfway through the movie. One of the things I felt myself saying was just kind of like, wow, the trailer really did not really didn't actually prepare me for this movie, at least plot-wise, the same way I thought it would, which sometimes is a good thing. You don't want the trailer to reveal every single thing in the movie and go into it knowing everything. And in this case, it was just like it threw me off thing. It wasn't even in a bad way, but just the way that they portrayed what's going to happen in this movie for the trailer, it was like a weird, like I had to kind of like, fit myself into it rather than it just like, coming on and I could just take it and it was great. It was like, this is like, oh, I have to, oh yeah, that was my expectation and here's what's happening, and I kind of had to get around that. So maybe that'll throw somebody else off and maybe I'm totally crazy, but that's one other thing I would have to say about this movie before spoiling it. Can I talk about spoiler stuff now? Geez, non-spoiler stuff is boring. I mean, maybe not boring. I apologize for all of us movie reviewers who have non-spoiler jobs to do, but man, there's so many things I do want to say about the movie that spoil all kinds of stuff and lines, but maybe I just ran out. I might just be ready to say spoiler time. I guess if I think of anything else, I can edit it in later, right? So here we go. At least to my knowledge for me right now, it is time for spoilers for Incredibles 2. Please don't spoil this one for yourself. I mean, it came out today. Like, it's a very fresh movie. So beware of anybody who does try to spoil it for you. Go into it not knowing what's going on and only watch this section and onward, and any other reviewers you like, watch their spoiler sections and onward if you've seen the movie. Alright, spoiler time! Yes! Now, I gotta say this. I knew as soon as Frozone showed up to Helen and Robert, Mr. Incredible, Miss Incredible, when they were at the pool and he came by to kind of set them onto their quest to meet up with the guy, Winston and his sister for DevTech or whatever, I knew as soon as he had like a business card, I was like, no normal person like this makes anybody's life that much easier in a superhero movie, and he's not evil. So I did call, as soon as he had a business card for DevTech, I called DevTech's gonna be the evil guys, which I was half right, I guess, because his sister was the one who really was pulling all the strings and making everything go crazy. So good for me on that one, although kind of shame on the movie for being so predictable because it was immediate. For whatever reason, I could tell right off the bat that they would be evil, or I guess one of them would be evil kind of thing. So I don't know if that's just me being too clever for the movie, or if the movie just doesn't care if we know that early, but it did try to play it off as some big plot twist. Like, oh my gosh, it's the sister who's, controlling everyone, and who is Screenslaver. I love that name. Like it was sort of supposed to be like that, but I was like, I knew the whole time anyway, so not really a big twist there. On that note, I love the name Screenslaver, and I do like this aspect. This is going to be a big negative thing here too, but if you recall in my earlier video where I talk about my excitement for the Incredibles 2 movie, I talked about the important aspects of Incredibles 1 and the ending, and how everyone seemed to think that the Underminer was going to be, it was like, wow, the Underminer's going to be back, it's going to be a big thing or whatever. And when I first saw the Incredibles, 14 years ago, I never thought that the Underminer was going to be anything more than just a way to end the first movie, because that wasn't the point. The point wasn't, oh, here's a new villain that we're going to have to, flush out with all this character stuff or plot stuff or whatever stuff. It was just there so we could see that the Incredibles had figured it out. Like, they kind of know now. There wasn't any kind of question. In the first movie, there wasn't any kind of question or hesitation. We see this villain guy, and we've got ourselves figured out. We know we're a team. We know we're a family. We know we're super. And they, they kind of put on the masks, and he does like the Superman classic, show the Incredible symbol thing. So that's all it was supposed to be, at least to me. But then, like I said in my previous video, everyone started saying, oh, well, the Underminer's going to be in it and everything, and it's going to start right there. And I was like, it is? Does it have to be? Because that wasn't really the point. And so, yeah, the movie started off with the Underminer scene, which I at least like the character of the Underminer. I love the concept of him saying, I am below you, but nothing is below me. Like, it's just classic villain stuff. That's the kind of villain stuff I do like. Having some kind of cheesy name like Underminer, and he says undermining things, like almost literally. Like, that's classic villain things. And so I like how we have some tastes of that in this new movie here. And it actually was started really well, too. Like, it started off great. I was like, cool, we get this fun sequence where we get to watch, the Incredible family try to stop him as he's trying to steal a bunch of money or whatever. And it was fun, but then we never saw any bit of that again for the rest of the movie. And it's not like we had to, but it was like I was thrown multiple directions. I was like, well, that was the end of the first movie, and then I had to find out that he's going to be in the second movie, and then he was, and then he just dropped out of it, and I was like, so Is there a reason? I mean, I guess I should ask this question. It makes me really curious. Did the creators of this movie expect to use the Underminer for the sequel? Or were they kind of like, oh, well, people are talking about it, so should we just throw them in there really quick at the beginning? It kind of makes you wonder, because if it didn't have a full, entire, huge effect on the movie, or at least it didn't get revisited, it was just there as a plot device to get the Incredibles into trouble again, which I'll get to that later. But, it makes me wonder. It's one of those things where it feels artificial. Like that's the word I think that works best for that. Rather than it just naturally, continuing the incredible story or whatever. It was like we have this character who didn't matter, but then mattered, but then I guess didn't end up mattering at all. And so because of that back and forth, and because of that uncertainty for the movie and for the viewer and for the characters, it just seems it's like such a movie rather than, being able to be immersed in the Incredibles universe. It just feels too much like a movie that people made to entertain people because of what people expect in a movie theater, if that makes any sense at all. So as negative as that sounds, I was at least rather pleased with the intro of this movie, even though I didn't really feel like it had to start with the Underminer and had to have him do his thing. It was fun. It had a pretty darn good start to this movie. Even before that, they showed, I guess his name is... the guy, Agent Dicker, or whatever his first name was, the guy who's worked with Robert Parr in the past, had him, as soon as I saw him interrogating somebody, I was curious to see who it was, and it turned to be this Tony guy, which every time I hear the word Tony, I think of Tonyloaf, when Dash is like, should be eating if we had Tonyloaf, which is, it's another one of those great quotable lines from the first movie. It was just so fun, because that character is honestly such an innocent guy in the story, and he means something to Violet, so he means something to us as a viewer too. But starting off with, him getting interrogated was a cool, clever way to kind of get us, have a little bit of nostalgia, but not too forced nostalgia from the first movie to kind of guide us through the second movie. And it worked well as here's a situation that he's in, and he uses that as a flashback to get the viewer into where the end of the first movie ended off, kind of thing. So it was good. I really liked the beginning of the movie. Really fun. And while I'm on this part of the movie, this first act here, one thing that really didn't work as well for the movie as much as I think they tried to make it work was the concept of, at the end of the first one, it's the supers are back, or at least the Incredible family, they're back, or they, like I was saying earlier, they know what they're doing, they're supporting each other, they've got it figured out. And so for the viewer, we're like, oh yeah, we got it figured out, this is great. But then they had this thing where City Hall almost gets busted up, and so the politicians are like, oh, they're obviously clearly evil because they busted up City Hall. And they mentioned this in the movie too. It's even very aware of it doing this. It was this whole thing of well, the supers gotta be illegal again. And so it's a private thing. The person, Winston, who works for DevTech, it's a private company that wants to promote the superheroes, which from the trailer I was thinking it'd be some kind of, government agency or something, which is fair. But then I was just impressed with how quickly people's minds have been swayed in the Incredibles universe. I mean, even in the first movie, it was Incredibles are great. Hi, Mr. Incredible. Help us save us from Bon Voyage. It's a thing. Which Bon Voyage, another great classic. I mean, that right there, it's such a hysterical villain name, hysterical way of doing things. That's what I love. But so we had the Incredibles, first movie, superheroes are a prominent thing, which they showed very early, and then they became an underground hidden thing. You couldn't do it anymore. And by the end of that, our tone was on a high note. It was yeah, let the politicians figure that out, but we'll figure out everything else, kind of thing. That's a positive tone to end that one on. And then here, it turned out that they were still in the negative area, which is fair, but then, Winston's we're going to bring you to the positive light, and then all of a sudden it was positive. I was Elastigirl saved the train, a couple hundred people that was going, backwards and all that, and which is fine, good of her to save that train, good of her to have a shot to show good things about superheroes, but then it was just oh, they really are great. It's how easily swayed is this society here, where a superhero can do one bad thing, or at least try to do the right thing and still end up getting in trouble, and then she tries to do the right thing again and then gets praised for it. It's just it was way too back and forth for a little bit there for me, just because of the fact that that's the main plot of the movie, so to speak, or at least that's kind of what helps lead the plot for the characters. But if you're going to go back and forth about whether society accepts and wants superheroes or not, at least be pretty clear about it. It's one thing to use the movie to sway from one side to the other and really watch society grow like that, but if you just willy-nilly, well, this thing happened, so no one likes him anymore, or, well, this thing happened, so everyone's proud of him these days. It's well, doesn't work as well. It kind of falls apart there. But even with that, the movie is still quite good. There's still a lot of stuff in there that's a lot of fun, and I should talk more positively about it. Like the whole Mrs. Incredible or Elastigirl has to go back into hero work. Like, how does she get supported through that? It was really cool to see her, get her new motorcycle thing. What they call it, the Elasticycle or something? Or she used to have an Elasticycle and now she has this one. I also liked, by the way, how Mr. Incredible's old car was called the Incredibile. Like, that's genius right there. Again, classic superhero stuff like that. But anyway, I'm just watching her, kind of start driving on the freeway or whatever, and everyone's like, oh, it's Elastigirl, it's Elastigirl, and they love her kind of thing. It makes sense, right? I mean, that's a society that has superheroes in it, and they want to see their hero people, like, I'm a fan of yours, you're my hero kind of thing. And it had a lot of realistic stuff like that. I guess when Frozone, great character, and Mr. Incredible and Mrs. Incredible, when they first arrive at the dev tech, building thing, whatever it was, and their driver told Frozone, he's like, you're my biggest fan. I mean, your biggest fan. And he's so disappointed that he kind of, messed up his introducing himself to Frozone. That kind of thing is realistic, and those little details don't take a long time. That was like a few seconds of film right there, but just having that makes it seem more real and more fun, and it kind of helps the audience feel connected with the movie, because a lot of us are also in awe of these superheroes, and I guarantee if Frozone was a real guy, he'd be one of the most popular people in the world. I love his character. I love what he does. Also, just specifically because, for whatever reason, my ice, if cold and ice speak to me. I've always been like a cold, cool person kind of thing. Not cool, but cool person with temperature and things. I've always enjoyed, clouds and coldness more than sun and heat kind of thing. So, X-Men 2, or I guess X-Men 1 too, that one, the guy with the ice powers, and just ice powers have always spoken to me. So he, in particular, is kind of like my guy in that movie. Probably my favorite hero. He was a lot of fun. I guess this is a good opportunity. This is a good opportunity to point out how amazingly shocked I was to see them use some bad words in this movie. There were like some level 1 bad words for a little bit there. They kind of came all at once. And then there's a scene where they call Frozone to their house to try to get help with Jack Jack, which I'll get to that later. But just the concept of Jack Jack's powers are freaking out and all kinds of stuff was happening. And Frozone started to say, what the f-? And then you kind of heard the F there, and then they cut right there. I was like, whoa. I mean, it's multiplied by 10 just because of the fact that Samuel L. Jackson is known for that line, and that he's the one who's voicing Frozone. Hilarious. That was one of the most, in your face funny moments to me. But I just love his character, so I had to mention that right there too, because that's such a his character thing. No other character in the Incredible series could have made that so funny, especially because of Samuel L. Jackson. Great stuff there. But his character, in watching him, it's cool near the end of the movie, watching him and knowing Elastigirl and knowing Mr. Incredible eventually became mind control type of thing. That's a cool scenario for our 2 young protagonists, well, 3, I guess. Our 3 young protagonists of Violet and Dash and Jack Jack to have to get into, how do we save our parents? And because, part of the first movie is, established very early on that Dash wants to run fast, and Violet says that we're not supposed to use our powers, and she's kind of nervous about it. That's a great set of character arcs for that first movie, and then continuing that into this movie, it was there a little bit more too. It was well, can't we use our powers now? I thought we could do it now, and the parents had to be well, not really. Well, at least Mrs. Incredible, she was kind of not really so much. So it was fair. It was kind of cool, and so getting them into that situation of okay, we really need to take control of this situation is cool. We get to see that. That follow-up, I guess is a good way to say it. That follow-up from the arc in the first movie coming into, well, Mom and Dad are in trouble, or we are the only ones who can save them. Good. That was very fair. So I like what they did with those characters, at least at that point in the movie. I wasn't really a huge fan of, Dash needing help with math homework again and again, and Violet having, so much angst over Tony Reibinger, Tonyloaf guy. It was a little overdone, and that's the part of the movie where it feels like it was either fillery or just not important, and then that's where the pacing kind of fell apart a little bit, just because it's yeah, we get it. Mr. Incredible's having trouble, being at home with the kids alone. Yeah, we get it. Math is different. School's ridiculous. I know myself, trust me. And yeah, we get it. Violet's upset that Tony doesn't remember her anymore. It's got anything else? Is there anything else in there for our characters to go through? I mean, I know our main storyline was Elastigirl working for Dev Tech and figuring those things out. But like the things happening with math homework and all that wasn't really supporting that. And then here's what I'll talk about this now. I apologize for anybody I'm going to offend here, because I know I'm going to be not in the majority in saying this, but the whole Jack thing doesn't really work for me. I mean, his character hardly worked in the first movie, just because it's like, oh, it's a baby who has superpowers. It's funny because it's a baby who has superpowers. Babies don't have superpowers. Like it just seems very immature. It's not really clever in any real way. It's just kind of a baby with powers, and they're trying to milk that for all it's worth, and good lord, for the second movie, did they ever. So the first movie, I was okay. I was like, whatever, Jack, fun, haha. In this one, it was like, geez, tone it down. I mean, how many baby has power jokes can you possibly try to make, or baby has powers scene that he can't control can you possibly... I mean, he had a fight with a raccoon. Think about this. There was a fight, or rather, a sequence where a baby with superpowers had to have a fight with a raccoon that went on for like multiple minutes, and it's like, this seemed like a pretty decently long movie. I didn't see it. I should look it up. I didn't look at how many hours and minutes this movie would be, but the fact that they had a 3 or 4 minute sequence of a raccoon fighting a baby with powers, it's like, it wasn't really... people were laughing, but I was like, this isn't really funny. I mean, for one thing, that poor raccoon, how did it make it out alive? I care about animals. And then Jack, too, it's like, yes, we get it. He has powers. Can you move on to something else, or at least make this mean something? And it was very meaningless for a lot of the movie. Now, eventually, when it came to the fact of Violet and Dash finding out, like, wait, Jack has powers? And Mr. Incredible, he was like, what, you have powers? Like, those scenes are okay because it mattered to the character. Like, that changes how they feel about things, and it changes how they interact together, and that's what you want. You want to have some good changes and good stuff going on with the characters, but it just was so overplayed and so saturated with Jack does crazy things. And also, does he really have to have like 12 powers, really? It was almost like they were trying to experiment with, like, how much fun can we have giving a baby random powers for The Incredibles 2? It was, maybe fun to make the movie, and maybe fun for some viewers to watch so many things happen, but after a while it just gets ridiculous. It's like, okay, so what's he gonna do next? Like, create solid gold out of something? Is he gonna then turn something to stone? What are all these other classic things that are gonna happen? I don't know. I didn't like it. The whole Jack thing really did not work very well. And it was very overused. Anybody who's seen the movie, which you're only watching this part of the review because you have seen the movie, right? Anybody who's seen it is like, yeah, he was in that movie a lot, and they referenced his powers a lot, and they had to deal with them a lot. And it kind of just, it slows things down, and you're doing good with your main story here. Elastigirl working for this company, and a little bit of interaction with her and Mr. Incredible, and you're moving right along, and then you kind of get in this sludge of, like, trying to get through this scene just so we can have the laughter because Jack did something funny. I don't know. How about just the animation in this movie? Just, did it look good? Did it not look so good? One reason I think I don't like those live-action Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, whatever movies, those Marvel movies, those Marvel superhero movies, it seems so fake-ish. And I know it's weird to say because, like, when the first Spider-Man movies came out with Tobey Maguire 15 years ago, yeah, it didn't look perfect, but it was, the early 2000s, late 90s superhero movies or whatever. Like, that's a thing. But now we have, it's I guess at that point we didn't have 50 million people making Avengers movies. We didn't have, movies made entirely with CGI, like in the way they're made today, like these Transformer movies and these Avenger movies, which I've never even seen, by the way, because I know I'm not going to enjoy them so much. But it's just like, it's so... everything is over the top because we can make it over the top. Like, we can do that. We know with the technology we have now as people, humans, that film creators can do the most amazing things and the most crazy superhero scenes and fight sequences and all that. And it really just throws me off. It's just like, it's unpredictable because they can do the most unpredictable things, but you can predict it's going to be so unpredictable that it just is going to be crazy anyway. I don't know. It seems, again, artificial to me. It's hard to get into it when it's made so much for the fans and made so much for the movie-going experience. And so with The Incredibles, here we are with the same technology that's available, but an animated movie, and Pixar and Disney, like that kind of thing. I mean, maybe it's like a bias or something, but I like it a lot. The things they would do in this movie, the animations they would have, the ways they would portray things, it was really cool. And it's actually funny too, because even Frozone's ice, I mean, he's the one who really speaks to me. You can notice that the ice effects that he has when he uses his powers, especially at the beginning of the movie, are way different than the effects they had back in 2004 when they used his ice powers. And I kind of like the way it looks more in the 2004 version, just because in this one it was like so realistic. It was like, ice is crystally and kind of shiny and has that ice effect. You can tell it was like real ice, which is, it's kind of just people saying like, yeah, that's our technology can do that. Technology these days for animated films like this can have very realistic looking ice, but then everything else is still animated too. So it was almost like weird, not weird that they changed it or did it in a different way, but it was like, oh, it's different. The ice is different, and we're in this new age of technology where it's gonna look different. So I don't know if it's even a good thing or a bad thing, because I did generally love the animation in the movie. It was fun to watch. Things with fire, things with the Violet's shield is a very cool image, and it looked cool back in 2004. So all that stuff is really cool. I guess the sequences of just how do we get out of situations, or how do we, like stopping the boat at the end of the movie, how do we use our powers and our creativity and our quick thinking to get out of the situation. Watching them do things like that and using their powers that way was really cool. The water effects look awesome, come to think of it. I mean, at that point in the movie, I was more worried about the characters and what they were doing. But now that I think about it, I was like, yeah, the underwater stuff and just water looked fantastic. It wasn't like I was watching an animated movie. It was like I was watching a really well done Incredibles movie at that point. So good for that. The hypnotism stuff with Screenslaver, I love that name, with Screenslaver, like it was kind of jarring. I mean, in a cool way, when you saw those screens kind of trying to hypnotize people or get someone to focus on it, like it looked pretty cool. And when Elastigirl sneaks into what we think at the time, even though I knew it wasn't going to be the real guy, this Screenslaver hideout thing where it has that room full of just hypnotism stuff everywhere, it's pretty hardcore cool just to be like, whoa, it's very bright all of a sudden, and it's like I have to close my eyes and I have to get through this situation for Elastigirl. Pretty cool stuff. I mean, fast-paced, and almost, in some cases, too fast-paced, because it's hard to process everything going on, but it was done very well. So I love the way the movie looks. In the end, I really do. I love the way it looks, and I, for the most part, like how the characters go through it, and how they use their powers to go through things. On the topic of powers, though, I was trying to say earlier how there were kind of some new age superheroes in this movie that didn't really fit the classic one that I tend to like. Now that I can talk about it freely with the spoilers, having that character, like I think she called herself Void, she had like the colored hair and the bright colored suit, and she kind of, the way she talked, the way she acted, and the way she interacted with Mrs. Incredible, or Elastigirl, I should say at that point. But it was you could see a clear difference. It was actually really well done. You could very clearly tell that this girl Void is kind of younger and less experienced, not dumb or stupid, but just like she looked up to Mrs. Incredible, and she's like, man, I'm a hero too. I'm a young hero, and you're my hero. I want to act like you, or at least I want to have the smarts that you do, and you've been really inspirational. That is a really cool thing to do. And so when they introduced that group of heroes, I was pleased, because it was just fun seeing, some clever new heroes, because I did find myself saying early on in this movie, I kind of hope that we see more just heroes. Like, I don't even care what they do with them, but just people with powers, because it's such a big thing in this society. Like, that's the whole point of the movie. The heroes were there, and they were great, and then they had to go to the underground, and then some of them got killed by Syndrome, and they got to come back a little bit, we thought. I mean, all that stuff. So I was thinking, like, yeah, we got to have some more superheroes at some point, and they did, and they weren't really the classic funny superheroes, the kind of like that would call themselves Screenslaver. I mean, Screenslaver is a bad person kind of thing, not a hero, but just that classic goofy, like their name is what they are, says what they do, or something like that. We didn't really have that as much. I mean, we had that guy called like the Brick, and it didn't even say what his power was. He just was the Brick. I didn't really even get that, but it was fun though. Like I'm glad that they gave us some more things to look at and some more ideas they had for here's some heroes and here's some characters in this society. And some of them were foreign, I guess. They were talking about bringing them in from all over the world. So it was kind of cool to give that kind of like that bigger picture, that glimpse of a bigger picture. It didn't go way overboard with focusing on how other countries deal with superheroes and what laws they have or whatever. It was just kind of like a cool little like, yeah, we're there. We brought them in, and maybe they can expand on that in the future. I feel like I've made a lot of points in a very short time frame there. I just point, like this. Um, There's a few things in this movie that are just kind of fun individually, even if they didn't really add a heck of a lot to the movie. I'm thinking about things where the Incredible family gets to the new house. It's really big, it's cool, it's fun. And Dash finds that remote thing, and he starts pushing buttons, and couches are appearing, and the fireplace lights itself, and the water falls from the ceiling, and he keeps hitting buttons, and things start going wrong and falling into the water, and it was like, haha, yeah, they're getting used to their new house. But it wasn't super fantastic, and it didn't really add a lot to the movie, but it was good that they had the detail of, well, they're not just going to go from a motel of nothing to this crazy house, instantly. So at least they had details like that, and it was fun. So I'm okay with scenes like that just kind of work in and of themselves. I guess another one that I laughed at just because of the way they handled Violet's character in this one. It was actually fantastic the way they did her character here. When Mr. Incredible takes all the kids to what was it called? The dirty platter, the something platter, the whatever platter, wherever Tonyloaf works. It was funny just knowing that he brought them to a place where Tonyloaf works, and then the concept of when she sees him, it was a great spit take type of thing, or like water came out of her nose. It looked awesome animatedly, and just the way she would not look at him at all, and the way she she was a lot shyer in the first movie, and she kind of came out of that a little bit. That's part of her character, and the way he was like, well, nice to meet you, and she just kind of did. Yeah, she kind of did that kind of thing. I mean, it was fun. Like, that was, again, it didn't add anything really to the rest of the movie, but that kind of scene, at least, in and of itself, was a fantastic thing. It almost feels like, I mean, because, again, I don't want to go back on what I said earlier and say it seemed like there's a lot of filler, unnecessary scenes, but it's almost like that felt like a short. Like a Pixar short. Like, they had this thing where they animated one single scene or one sequence of some character thing that happened, and it was Mr. Incredible bringing the kids to where Tonyloaf works, and it worked for itself, and it was kind of fun, and the characters were fun with it. But then after that, it was like, well, back to the regular story where none of that ever mattered. So I don't know, I guess, because I guess that's where I'm ending up here. I generally liked the movie quite a bit, but it did have some odd scenes that didn't really fit in there, but they were still fun in and of themselves. So what do I say? If I liked individual scenes and they didn't even connect together, does that make the whole thing really connect and flow, or does that make it up and down, or I don't know. It's an odd feeling because I don't really feel that way about most movies. I tend to like most of it, and there's a couple things I don't like that I forget about, but I don't want to forget. That's the thing. I don't want to forget about anything in this movie because it was all, other than maybe too much Jack, but it was all pretty fun. Like, there's no, even if it didn't fit together and make such a super solid connected movie, it was still there, and I still had fun with it, and I guess that's good enough. So, yeah, how about that? I don't want to sound so back and forth or, unsure, because I guess I want to give credit where credit is due for the great things, and I do want to point out that there's some things that make less sense or don't work as well, but that's okay. It really is a fun movie. I don't think I've even mentioned this yet, but just if I compare first movie, second movie, which one's better, I do think that the first one is better made. The Incredibles 1 has more solid character arcs, it has more solid character-driven story, that type of thing. The second one, it has that stuff, but it just wasn't, it wasn't as, perfect, magical. I think I don't want to say this because movies don't happen by accidents. I guess they sort of do. I mean, you didn't just have a bunch of people who accidentally walked into a studio and made The Incredibles 1 movie, and it was so great, because it really is so great. But it almost even is just like, man, it's just a solid, uniquely good movie because of what it does and the characters it has and the way it does it. And so when we had this second one 14 years later, I mean, there's already an established universe of The Incredibles and what they do and what we know as viewers, so it's like less possible for it to be a happy accident that's just so great. And again, I don't want to say accident really, because it isn't just an accident that it happened, but just the way it did happen. And the first movie was so solid and so good, and in the second one, it's not as solid. It's definitely there, but the solidity of it and the firmness of how great it is, it's a little bit weaker structurally and in terms of pacing and a couple character things. But really is a fun movie. One other thing I was thinking of during the movie that I was like, dang, like that could have been way better if they did it this way, just was the fact of Elastigirl sneaks into what we think is Screenslaver's lair or whatever, and we see her kind of actually, end up, what am I trying to say? she ends up, uh, catching him and getting him, and she unmasks him right there. And I was like, "Whoa, who's it going to be?" I was expecting it to be Winston, I think is his name, or whatever the sister's name is. I can't think of her name at all. I was expecting it to be one of them, but then I realized that since he had the goggles on, I was like, he's under the control, because it was some nobody character. And I said, there's no way there's going to be a nobody character be our main villain here. So I kind of knew what was going on there. But then right after that, they showed him being like, wait, what? What was I doing? What did you guys make me do? And then later in the movie, when I realized that, he's just the throwdown, the throwaway guy, the guy who they're using to their advantage, I was like, dang, I wish that they could have, kept it a secret, because if we thought the whole time that screensaver really had been caught, and then when they did reveal that it was officially the sister who did it, it could have been a much stronger plot point. But it was so obvious, and they tried to make it so, it was so obvious that he had no idea what he was doing, and he was like, wait, I was under control or something. He didn't say it that way, but that could have been stronger if they at least left a little bit of mystery there, or at least they made the viewer think that we had some closure on it, but then really it wasn't closed at all. That could have been more fun and more, exciting for a plot twist, and it really didn't end up that way. So that's all right. Speaking of endings, I want to compare the ending to this movie with the first one, because something very interesting happened in this movie at the ending. I mean, not really, but inwardly to me, something interesting happened that was very similar to the first movie when that one ended. And you'll notice, if you've been watching me say this over and over, you'll know what I mean. In the first movie, at the end of the movie, we have the Underminer comes out, and the Incredible family's like, all right, let's suit up, guys, and we're going to take this down. Again, they have it figured out. They kind of know at that point. And so... and that's all. That was it. That was the whole point of the ending, is that they know, they have it figured out. And so at the end of this movie, the same thing happened. I love the concept of, I laugh quite a bit. This is a great scheme, where they have Tonyloaf going into the Incredibles car, and they go to the theater, and, we're going to see a movie, and Mr. Incredible said something about how, we're going to be far away, but not watching you, wink, wink, that was fun. I mean, it's just classic, family messing with the daughter, or messing with the boyfriend of the daughter, or potential boyfriend, that type of thing. And then he said something really weird in that scene, too. Something really bizarre, where I found myself saying, what? Where he was saying, he, leaned over to Elastigirl or Mrs. Incredible and was like, we could even get closer, too. It was, a very weird, suggestive line. And so they get to the theater, and they see, car barreling down the street, and guns are being fired, and, the heroes are needed. They need heroes there at that point. And so they, she throws all that money at Tony, saying, save me a seat, 8 rows back, or whatever. That was fun and cute. And they start driving away, and they're all like, all right, guys, let's get suited up. We have this. We're going to go do this thing. And that's the ending from the first, to me, that's the effect that they were having in the first movie, but then there was no main villain here. It was really weird how the Underminer took all that money and kind of foiled the Incredibles there, so to speak, in some ways, and escaped and never came back. And then here, we don't have another named supervillain and doing something crazy and, leading us into a third movie or into whatever. It was just generic car, generically escaping from a scene with generic guns, being generically chased by the cops who needed the help of a superhero, or in this case, the family of superheroes. And so it had the exact effect that I felt with the first movie, just without the Underminer character that everyone thought was going to be, or they knew. I mean, everyone knew except for me. Everyone knew and expected him to be in this next movie too. So it was such a weird ending to me, because that's exactly what happened for the first one for me, but it's actually happening in the second one here. And I totally get it. I get that they don't want to do the exact same thing as the first movie, where they have some named villain come out and say, I'm this villain and I'm the new threat. That could have been, that would have been so overused at that point, right? We've already seen that. They could have even done even dumber of a thing, where they had the Underminer come back and say, I'm back again, and they have to go foil him again. That would have been really stupid and really overused. But that's interesting to me, because if they did that with the Underminer in the first movie, and I have this question of, was that really the intention to bring him back for the second movie, or did they really just do that because that's what everyone talked about? And then in this movie, it's like they didn't give themselves anything to work with directly anymore, because they had their villain where it was open-ended, and I guess they could have, and here it's there's no way that those villains or those burglars or criminals in that car are going to be anybody important, right? I mean, they I guess it could be, but they didn't give themselves that same type of opening, whether they were intending to before or not. So just the ending was interesting to me. Not even a bad thing. I actually like the ending a lot, and that was the whole point. The whole point was we as a family have this figured out, and we're gonna go do our thing, and great. That's exactly what we want to see at the end of the movie after seeing our characters go through what they go through. So, not a bad thing, but just I hope this makes sense what I'm trying to say. Very fascinating to me specifically, just because of how I reacted to the first movie, and how I reacted to people reacting to the first movie, and then now reacting to this new movie here too. It's been a blast. This movie has been great. I love it. I love Frozone. I love the incredible family. I love the other heroes they showed. I love the plot. Don't like a couple things about what they did with a couple characters, but or some of those scenes, but it's worth it. Definitely worth watching. Is there anything else to say about The Incredibles 2? I don't think so. I think I'm done with this review, but as always, please ask questions if you have questions, make some comments, send some messages. You can always email contactjustafan@gmail.com. I see that email multiple times a day, so I will always see anything you send to it, unless I get thousands from my millions of fans. If I get thousands of emails a day, I might not see some of them, but so far we're good. And if you want me to address something else, please let me know. Like, hey, what do you think about this? Or, I think you're wrong about that. Or, can you explain further what you mean by this? Those are kinds of questions I do want on comments, messages, emails. Please feel free to say something about the movie that I didn't address, or tell me to address it further. Anything like that. That's just the fun of talking about movies right there. So feel free to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And even if you don't subscribe, that's okay. I mean, I'm just glad that you were able to watch this far and just watch me ramble on and on and on. It's amazing how much I can talk. But thanks very much for being here no matter what. And if you will excuse me, I did go find out how to get like cold and ice superpowers. So I'm going to go work on that. Thanks very much.